One percenters, welcome back. Greatest Peaks, episode 12. Tim Duncan, let's go.
Attack orbiting around their incredible scoring. In this series, we've seen two types of big men. The first anchored the defense while playing a kind of co-pilot role.
Timmy.
The second dominated with their team's attack orbiting around their incredible scoring. Which brings us to the final great big man in this series. Was Tim Duncan more of an offensive centerpiece, or did his crafty low-post scoring game and suffocating interior defense make him the very best of the two-way big men?
The big fundamental.
And go through the best.
I hate that phrase, two-way player. I hate it, man.
Timmy will hit you in phrases. Got you. Almost. Just the worst right here. Nice try.
Duncan is easily the best modern defender never to win Defensive Player of the Year.
I didn't know that.
Teammate Bruce Bowen is actually the only player with a larger share of votes over the years to never claim the award. And like great defensive centers before him, Tim's value comes from protecting the most important real estate in the game, the space right in front of the hoop. I've never seen any public record of his actual wingspan, but Duncan was long. He was around 7 feet without shoes and had the arms of a weeping willow tree. This is one of the reasons he blocked so many shots out of a shooter's hand. He had great feel and timing when targeting attempts like this. Kenyon Martin is auditioning for the role of Charles Smith here until Kevin Willis ruins it with a foul. And here Devin George is overcome with the wild idea to baptize Duncan. And notice Timmy used that off arm again to slow down George and feel out the block.
That's illegal.
Ori trying him, and Duncan takes a big step and again uses his off arm to brace against him, and that swimmer's reach can do the rest. His strength helps this style of shot contesting because he doesn't need to load up to jump. He plows through his man here and probably catches Kobe by surprise. And the big fundamental likely caught plenty of shooters off guard because he kept his hands down when he moved, then typically brought them up when jumping like this. So he was always under control when sliding over to help in the paint.
These are all positional blocks. He's just reading it and using his length. Tim Duncan's like probably below average NBA athlete.
This steady body control allowed him to challenge threats in the lane and then immediately recover into a second challenge, which is one of the perks of a more floor-bound approach because he never jumped himself out of a play. Again, you'll see his hands are down, ready to jump, but he stays locked and loaded, and his windmill arms meant he could swivel from one threat to the next because his rim protection was less about leaping and more about timing and that ant-like standing reach. Duncan's block percentage during the playoffs in these seasons wasn't too far from the all-time greats, although his numbers were suppressed slightly by playing next to another center. When the Spurs went Twin Towers, there was about a 15% reduction in his block rate. Of course, keeping his hands down.
Great timing. And if you're playing with two Twin Towers in there, the defense happens before they even get to the paint. It's like having guard dogs. People don't want to go towards your house or security cameras. They just stay away.
Down and not out meant he rarely deflected passes, and that made it a touch easier to slip them around him. Another key to Duncan's paint defense was his positioning. He'd sag into the lane an extra step or two, so he didn't have to go far to meet penetrators. Again, note the body control to stay down, and he barely needs to jump to swat it.
Discipline,
He could stand one step into the lane,
timing,
toe tapping
big fundamental, not just offensively, but defensively.
Technique to avoid 3 seconds, and that cut down the distance to help off the weak side. Here he slaps his hips in disagreement, a rare move in a deep bag of protestations, some of which were more animated, and some of which were more subtle performance art. Although my personal favorite is the incredulous stare.
I'll bet some money on that one. I don't bet anything. I'll go for hamburger. I'll bet you a hamburger. You got it.
Speaking of reactions, Duncan's weren't always lightning quick. George is free here before he goes, but he's so well positioned it takes one step to protect the rim, and there was usually a tiny delay before he started sliding, and the third time was not the charm for Devin. TD usually arrived on time, but sometimes that minor delay in reaction speed led to a bucket, but he also didn't need nanosecond processing because he was such a big presence, and he quick stepped toward the ball handler heavily influenced drives. He was even long enough to throw off floaters from skilled guards. In general, Duncan was aware of most threats.
When I talk about milliseconds matter all the time, it's how fast can you process like what he's about to do. What are these players likely to do? Is Steve Nash going to try to come around and dunk on him like they showed Devin George a bunch of times? Or is Steve Nash going to try to do a quick layup or a little floater around here? So he gets there, the timing, how he jumps, all of that is brains, it's processing.
A quick step toward the ball handler.
So he deters a lot of these shots, blocks a lot of these shots. Like right here, Nick Van Exel, Nick the Quick. What is he likely to do? Is he going to go there and dunk on him?
He was even long enough to throw off.
Or is he going to get here, not be able to slow down enough and throw a high floater?
In general, Duncan was aware of most threats. After some creative screening, he slides toward the action here, then realizes he needs to help on the roll man, and that is a tough make. Here's another storm of ball screens by the offense, and he plugs up the first roller, realizes he needs to recover to the second screen, and smothers the ball handler in a great team sequence. Duncan was part of a unit that choked off opponents at the rim, holding them well below league average on these high-value attempts. The Spurs were most successful with 2 centers out there, but even with Duncan as the lone middleman, they defended the paint incredibly well, and in general thrived behind a defensively oriented roster. This is also where Gregg established himself as an all-time coach, throwing in a zone every once in a while to throw off opponents, and instilling airtight schemes. The Spurs switched this pick and roll because Amari Stoudemire is mismatched.
Airtight schemes. I might coach a lot of offense. I do when I do training, it's the majority offense, but my team, we are dogs defensively, and it's all built around schemes off of being connected. And there's certain rules that we all have to apply and we use, and you have to stick with it. It's defense and discipline.
That's for the wing. Then Duncan can pick up Amari behind the play, and Manu Ginobili is down in a driving gap, and the whole thing's a clinic. The consistent implementation of these principles was impressive. A big shows on the pick and roll here, which means the other big in the paint slides to cover the roller, and wings were always prioritizing paint help. Bruce Bowen is sealing inside Duncan's man, and then the rotations quickly follow, and it leads to a low percentage shot. With Ginobili and Tony Parker yet to enter their primes, that Spurs roster was lighter on offensive parts, and instead featured defensive studs like Bowen and an AJ Admiral, who had his moments in spurts. All of this made the Spurs a defensive dynasty, posting some of the best multi-year stretches of regular season and playoff defense in league history. San Antonio's defense was practically elite without Duncan, holding teams nearly 4 points below league average from 2001 to 2004 with him on the bench. With Duncan protecting the paint as an anchor, the Spurs became an all-time defense, and he had the ability to plug up breakdowns with fantastic saves like this. However, he did have some blind spots in his vision, meaning he couldn't always locate the ball instantly or anticipate danger at all times. He just completely misses this slip play that Utah liked to bust out on occasion. And you could have a little tunnel vision while on the move.
So why do they miss it? Right. So why when I talk about processing and stuff like that, if you don't study stuff, if you don't see stuff quickly, if you don't understand what's going on, if you can't dissect it properly, you're going to look, lost. Like right here, he looks for the back screen, but they're looking for Dirk, and he gets Dirk. Right here, when you get a lot of misdirection or plays that look very, very similar. Okay, this is the Jazz. They run a lot of similar looking things. You look silly. So he's trying to process all this that's going on, and then he forgets about what happens here. This is what you see a lot with Jokic and a lot of 5-out spacing now. So he should just be sitting in there more. But I mean, this was kind of newer when they were playing.
A little tunnel vision. He just completely. This.
So like right here, this whole backside is open.
Flip play that Utah liked to bust out on occasion. And you can have a little tunnel vision while on the move. This cut isn't really going anywhere, but he zones out and misses the back door. And this is almost identical to
these are by design, right? So if you chase him, this little split second when his head is turned, he gets burned. Tony Parker gets burned on the back cut.
Out and misses the back door. And this is almost identical to a play from last episode where Robinson helps in front of Duncan, only Tim doesn't slide over to cover Robinson's man until it's too late, and there's no heroic save. Duncan played the Spurs pick and roll scheme reasonably well, showing them recovering to his man, but he was particularly effective sagging off the dribbler and then using his length to bother pull-up jumpers. Even far out on the perimeter, his never-ending arms caught shooters off guard, and since he was mobile enough to venture out a bit and use that size to keep ball handlers at bay, he was well-suited for sagging, dropping coverages against pick and rolls. His lateral movement wasn't really a strength, and he was slightly vulnerable on the outside to quickness. On this play, he's supposed to slow down the ball, but the sharp change of direction leaves him in Kobe's wake, and that whole Twin Towers thing was so effective back then. Now, while Duncan's mobility wasn't great, he was slow to decelerate, for instance, he wasn't a liability moving around the floor during that era. While he could be beaten by quicker players when guarding the ball, it was rare for big men at the time to face up on the perimeter and attack him with speed off the bounce. If anything, the slower, more interior-based game amplified some of TD's man defense, where his length could really bother opponents who couldn't stretch into the outside. He was also really strong enough not to be completely manhandled by Shaq himself. Of course, that didn't work every possession. I'm convinced flopping was the only way to actually slow down O'Neal.
There's no stopping Shaq.
Just like we've seen from most of the big men in the series, Duncan's defense was an enormous value add. The bigger question, though, is just how valuable was an offense run through Tim Duncan?
Tim Duncan. The week of greatness is back at Foot Locker. No way. That's insane.
In contrast to the guard-like approach we saw last episode from Kevin Garnett, Duncan's offensive game was rooted deep in the paint like a traditional center. Unlike old school centers, he was skilled enough to attack from the perimeter. He could face and drive all the way to the hole, but wherever he started, Duncan was often grinding closer to the basket with his strength. Because he was a contemporary of Shaq, few people talked about just how strong Timmy was, but he often worked for deeper position and powered into his points. At 200,
I would not call Tim Duncan very strong. I would call him very fundamentally sound. He's not going to be like Shaq, where he's going to weigh on you for post position and just push you back. He's going to continually work with his feet for better position.
Because he was the contemporary of Shaq, few people talked about just how.
So here, look at his feet moving a bunch.
But he often worked for deeper position and
here moving a bunch.
Powered into his points. At 260 pounds, he could hold this low position on the block and then swing into a move with force.
Like this is, he's not stronger than Samaki Walker here. He's getting pushed over right here. When he bangs him, okay, Duncan goes away.
Into a move with force. Notice how he dislodges.
Strong enough, but not stronger.
And he would lead with his arms on these little half hooks and turning push shots. Watch closely.
That's like Robert Ory.
And throws his arm straight up through Ory's left arm into the release. This takes great hand strength and turns his off arm into a shield. Again, backing down closer, and even though his man is sitting on the shot, he flares that left elbow for protection. All of these deliberate churning moves require incredible balance and sturdiness. He sort of
sturdiness. I mean, come on.
Pushes the defender with the ball before going through him, which takes a Velcro grip. And this technique naturally led to the rip-through foul, where Duncan picked up a bunch of extra free throws anytime his opponent's arms were down.
KD does. You can't get away with that anymore.
Or when they reached for an exposed ball and missed. Free throws were a big part of Duncan's scoring prowess. His 3-year peak in free throw attempts falls in the 98th percentile historically. And
rules aren't the same rules if you're in the post and on the wing. If you sweep through it and you know hit somebody's arm and shoot it, they won't give you that. But if you do it down low, they'll give it to you as a shooting foul.
As an efficiency booster, since Duncan shot 70% from the line. So much of his scoring was about methodically inching closer to the rim. Occasionally, he tried that up and under, and sometimes he'd throw in this power spin move where he's squeezing the ball in a vice. You'll notice he was rarely off balance, so when he spins away from the double team, all his weight is over that right leg, which helps him finish through contact. When his avenues to the hoop were cut off, he liked a little turnaround over his left shoulder, and like so many great post scorers, he could also wheel into the same turnaround over his other shoulder, although, unlike many right-handed players, it was rarer to see him turn off his shoulder. There's a rip-through attempt again, and I wonder if he was more comfortable shooting these turning left because he could use that off arm to clear out a contesting hand.
Because turning over the right shoulder, fading is a lot harder for right-handed players. I'll make a video on it. Yeah, the majority of people. I was just talking to one of my assistant coaches yesterday, and if you can do a 2-dribble pull-up going left, you're very, very elite. If you can do a 2-dribble pull-up going right, you're really, really good. Most players can't do that, period.
Of course, because it was a Tim Duncan move, he would jab step and fake his way into a little kiss off the glass every once in a while. Now, where have I seen that before? Duncan's bank shot wasn't actually a huge part of his game. He called on it whenever he was facing the basket at an angle like this, but the banker was merely a component of his larger face-up attack, which involved little pull-ups on the baseline or in the middle of the floor even.
1-dribble pull-up, side jab, 1-dribble pull-up, jab, pull-up.
Beyond 15 feet during these seasons, which landed him in the bottom third of the league at the time. I don't know how much more accurate he was going to the bank on these attempts. He was certainly comfortable jab stepping and then playing it off the window, but this was still a flat stroke with a hitch. Some of these were straight out of the Adrian Dantley school of rhythmic upfaking. The shot was threatening enough to open up driving lanes where he could pump fake repeatedly until a defender reacted and then head downhill. There's that strength and body control to take contact from Shaq while decelerating. Despite his shooting struggles, Duncan actually had some nice touch on these slow motion rumbles to the rim. He wasn't the quickest, but he was always under control and dexterous enough to flip in all kinds of little shots. His face-up game was aided by a tight handle that let him put his head down and go. He didn't have
tight handle. I don't know, man.
Have the change of direction to unlock a variety of dribble moves, but he was secure enough to
serviceable handle
players on drives like this. We saw a svelter Kevin Garnett.
All right, you can't say he has a tight handle and then say Kyrie Irving or Kemba Walker has tight handles. Oh,
hold that line last episode. All of Duncan's high percentage shot attempts and free throws made him a strong playoff scorer during these seasons, stacking up well against most big men historically, save for the best of the very best. Using these playoff numbers, he looks far closer to Olajuwon than to someone like Walton as a scoring hub, but there's a little more to the story. When Duncan faced stronger defenses, his scoring wasn't quite as potent, dropping off more than many of the modern greats, and he had similar struggles in the postseason. He just didn't play many elite defenses, in part because the Spurs were so good. By the way, like Hakeem, Duncan took up basketball later than most. He was a 13-year-old swimmer in the Virgin Islands when he started, and because of that late start, he said he didn't feel he was ready for the NBA after his junior year at Wake Forest, when he would have been the #1 pick in the draft. This lack of experience might have been a reason why he started with some fuzzy court vision, but he was always an eager student and willing passer, and in time he figured out what to look for as an offensive hub. He learned passing reads that allowed the Spurs to stream a ton of their offense through him. They could dump it to Timmy in the post and have him attack help by kicking it to a three-point shooter, or he could wait for the double and find a teammate cutting.
If you guys are parents of young kids, you do not have to specialize your kids so early. As noted here, Tim Duncan didn't pick up basketball for a long time. Granted, he is 7 feet tall and freakishly athletic for human standards, but not NBA standards. But you can't start them later. A lot of kids or parents want to try to specialize early. But even when they come to me as young as 5, 6 years old, I give them general training because they need to adapt their bodies for all kinds of athletic moves, not just basketball. I can't specialize you, especially when you're 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old just for basketball. It's just not right. You're going to get overactive, overuse injuries, too much repetitive stuff. You need balance and you need diversity when you're young.
This should look familiar. It's the same kind of inside-out offense that we saw with Olajuwon's Rockets and O'Neal's Lakers. On this one, he patiently allows the defense to commit near the baseline, so the basic kickout is open, and man, Ginobili made some big plays in 2003.
Ginobili!
Only the help comes off the cutter to the corner, so Duncan fires it there nicely for a wide open look. And his towering height helped him move through these progressions with high, quick releases when he spotted an open cutter. He even flashed another Walton move, the little jump pass in tight quarters, creating an even better angle for an express shipment. His best, most consistent passes were probably these structured reads from the post to cutters or shooters, and estimates of shot creation peg him slightly behind someone like Kevin Garnett. Velocity helped the big fundamental because he didn't really throw to openings before they emerged. That could have been a touch earlier, and sometimes that made a difference. A key to hitting tight windows is to anticipate movement, and here there's a lag, and he's not ready to snap it over, and by then it's too late. When he could see a pass in front of him, he could drop some lovely dimes. Robinson in his line of sight here, and those huge hands, when he could just to anticipate movement.
Want to talk about passing, right?
And sometimes that made a difference.
What makes a great passer? Right type, right time, right target. Say it all the time. So right here, as soon as this guy turns his head, this is a dime. This is a boop, little bounce pass, and that should be a dunk. So he misses that first window if he had the skills to do that, or the balls, or whatever. So he misses it there. So now he brings the ball down, right? So now he doesn't have it above his head, so now he can't pass it to him here. So then he misses it. So now he has to pivot, and then he doesn't even pivot. He just moves it with his body instead of pivoting. So he still has it there, but by the time he does this, you know, if you would have pivoted, this would be a lot easier. And then if he pivots and this guy moves, you can flip your pivot again and swing it all the way over here. So structured stuff, you know, Tim Duncan's not a playmaker.
By then it's too late. When he could see a pass in front of him, he could drop some lovely dimes. Robinson's in his line of sight here, and those huge hands make the magic happen. Speaking of,
so he had the defensive processing speed, just not offense.
Magic, he was a favorite of Duncan's growing up. And so Timmy always wanted to freestyle like a guard in transition, and there's a Johnson-inspired look away. He still had blind spots at his peak. Openings in his periphery could go
again, unnoticed. That's a quick touch pass. He missed it.
Here's another one where
right here is also behind the back pass to Malik Rose. Right here, boom, that's a quick touch pass, right?
Could go unnoticed.
He could do it behind the back here. Like, these are all things that I've done, so I can easily teach this thing. And then you could fake this pass, get this guy to suck it in and skip it all the way over there. There's so many things.
Here's another one where the cut starts out of the corner of his eye, but he's kind of locked in.
So when you jab and then they all go to him, you can jump and then dime it.
Bank shot dance. Sometimes it felt like once he committed to a movement, there was no going back. He starts throwing this pass without adjusting for the defender, even though his teammate did. And I think Duncan had more of these glitchy looking turnovers than most superstars. However, slow adjustments don't mean slow actions. And he could certainly map the floor in front of him when he had a second to process it and then move the ball quickly.
A second? You don't got no seconds, man. You need milliseconds.
To my eye, he was most comfortable with quick reads out of set pieces where he knew what to look for, like in a short roll situation with a teammate in the dunker spot.
Yep.
He had nice chemistry with Robinson in particular, especially on passes from.
I mean, that just comes from great coaching and then structured stuff. So when you're in a system that's very, very structured and you know exactly where to look, if you catch it at the elbow, look opposite, look low post or dunker spot, you know, go through your reads. Some players have to teach progressions, like literally like football. This is read 1, this is read 2, or this is read 3. And, you know, they literally go left, right. Like that's how they do it. And, you know, a coach has to break it down like that for some players. Some players get it right away. Some players start to see it. And then some players can actually see it and then execute it. Sometimes a lot of players are like, oh, my bad. I see you. It doesn't matter. You already see it too late. And by the time you see it and then pass it, that window has already opened, closed, and it's gone.
From the top, there was a kind of big to big simpatico with these lobs to the Admiral, and they even ran a little twin tower pick and roll with the court space. Unfortunately, those were very rare, but it wasn't rare for Duncan to hop along with his front court mate, synchronized swimming style. Finally, the big fundamental could snap off some brisk outlets, and he would even try to throw these over the top when the opportunity presented itself, which was a nice fit with smaller players who like to get out and run in transition. Much like Walton's Blazers, San Antonio's Duncan-centric attacks produced pretty good results, but they certainly weren't a team powered by offense, finishing about 2 points ahead of the league on that end from 2001 to 2003. Ironically, the 03 title team was one of the weakest Spurs teams of Duncan's prime. But a theme of this series is the difference between building an offense around a big man versus a team around a big man. Like Walton, Garnett, and Robinson, Duncan's two-way impact made him a superstar. And on those teams, his post-up game was a perfect fit for a defensively slanted roster that was supercharged by Duncan's paint protection. Because of this, he has some legendary plus-minus stats during these seasons, posting the second largest point differential on record when he was on the court compared to when he was off the court, trailing only his teammate David Robinson from the preceding 3 years. While Robinson and Duncan reinforce the incredible value of defensive studs who are offensive all-stars, it gives me some pause that the top two numbers came from the same team in back-to-back periods. There's plenty of noise in 50 games of plus-minus data, and Duncan's surrounding stretches do look drastically different. There were nagging injuries in those following years, but his scoring numbers remained the same. Part of the plus-minus drop-off was probably San Antonio growing less dependent on his offense as players like Parker and Ginobili emerged. Ginobili! A very good playoff offense in the mid-2000s, and while Duncan certainly wasn't a poor fit, his brand of slower, high-viscosity post-scoring doesn't scale up that well. Methodical isolation scoring can lift a team's offensive floor, but it's hard to be a great co-pilot with that approach. His lack of outside shooting limited some of his off-ball value. He could splash in jumpers off a pick and pop, but he just wasn't that efficient on these. He was a far better roll man where he could catch and finish through contact near the rim, and he was mobile enough to take a dribble and adjust at the hoop. And this kind of off-ball game is a key to blending in on better and better offenses. He added more value with his offensive rebounding game, although they were often grabbing his own misses, which was also a byproduct of his power scoring, constantly trying to press forward toward the basket. This is kind of like a lighter version of what we saw from Shaq in episode 9. You can also see how crazy long Duncan is here, barely jumping to reach 10 feet. This overall combination of scoring, shot blocking, and plus-minus data gave Pete Duncan some of the best impact metrics on record. And while they might overstate his value, they also drive home how valuable his archetype can be, where Duncan's low post scoring and playmaking can help weaker offenses reach respectable heights, while at the same time driving them to contention with huge impact on defense. And that same package can turn a solid team into a title favorite, which is exactly why Tim Duncan's two-way impact gave him one of history's greatest peaks. Exactly why Tim Duncan's two-way impact gave him one.
Two-way impact, greatest peaks. I mean, this one is as boring as Tim Duncan's game. I do appreciate that he was really, really skilled. Looking back on it now, oh my God, I just watched the Clippers and Nuggets. He's kind of like Zubac, and Zubac is just your run-of-the-mill center now. I mean, he looks terrible against Jokic. Offense, very good isolation score. Yes, uses power and length to grind to hoop and spike free throw rate, good pass. He was like an okay free throw shooter, good post passer, outlet passer, better on structured reads, off ball value. It was decent. Weak side, like you have to remember the generation of the styles of the game is so different. This is back when two big men were the thing. I mean, everybody wanted bigs back then. Two big men. Now, like, you don't even want one big man. It's like you want an athletic 7-footer Kevin Durant type thing in a small, gritty Draymond Green. I don't know any team that is successful with two centers right now. Look, Lakers, Dwight Howard, Anthony Davis, DeAndre Jordan. These guys hardly ever get on the floor at the same time. The game is just so different. So you have to kind of get your head back into that generation of how they played. It was a lot more slower. You could do some zone defense stuff. People weren't as reliant on the three-pointer. The Curry Warriors haven't switched the whole game yet. The 7 seconds or less Suns haven't even changed the game yet. Just a lot different. It's crazy looking back and seeing kind of these things, and seeing how he portrays it, and then my memory, and then where basketball is now. Tim Duncan, not too excited. Yeah, it's just not that exciting. Was he really great? Yes. Nothing more to say other than the big fundamental. So remember the story that people tell you, talk about you will ultimately live pretty long. So if the media doesn't hype you up, Tim Duncan's just kind of fading away. Never mentioned in the GOAT stuff, kind of like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And yeah, it's kind of tragic, but it's kind of just the way humans are, man. We're just a tiny little blip in the universe. Until next time, take 14 minutes, 24 seconds, or 1% of your day to get better. Peace.